can see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. So welcome everyone to the third in the series of the Speak Out Talks. Just to give you an introduction to myself, my name is Marie Hemingway. I'm one of the founders of Speak Out Revolution. I know a few people who are joining the session, but for those who I don't, really nice to meet you. To give you a quick introduction into the Speak Out Talks, Speak Out Revolution wanted to provide a platform for individuals to speak out on topics which deserve attention. So this series of talks is about empowering individuals to attention in the workplace, enable us to challenge the status quo, and then collectively advocate for organisational change within our own organisations. Previous talks that we've run have included the unseen consequences of all-male panels, making invisible disability visible in the workplace, and today's talk is on neurodiversity in the workplace. So if you're interested in those talks, they'll shortly be available on our website. Please do check them out. We attempt to record all of our talks so that people can watch them in slow time as well. So for today's talk, we're going to be looking at neurodiversity in the workplace. We think at Speak Out Revolution, this is often an overlooked dimension of diversity. And so we're really excited to specifically hold a talk on this topic and try and raise awareness in that space. For those who don't follow us on social media, we have had a focus on neurodiversity. And one of the things that I wanted to flag up for people joining us from organizations is a study that was recently released by the Institute of Leadership and Management in October, and you can find it on our social media channels if you're interested in reading it. It revealed a significant lack of understanding and awareness of neurodivergence in the workplace. Over a half of autistic employees feel excluded amongst their colleagues. So we're really hoping that this talk will spark some interest from people on the call to start conversations within their own organizations on how they can become truly more inclusive for everyone. And I also wanted to touch on the fact that this talk is quite personal to us at Speak Out. Francis Holmes, who we'll hear from shortly, understands that the challenges and opportunities that come with living with or being neurodivergent, as she lives with dyslexia. And so we're particularly passionate about raising awareness on this topic. And then I just wanted to say we're really encouraged to see interest from across so many different sectors. This talk is massively oversubscribed now. We have nearly 1,000 people with registered interest on LinkedIn, which is amazing. We've raised over £250 in donations from people joining this talk for Speak Out Revolution, which essentially runs our website for a year. So thank you very much, everyone. In terms of the agenda today, I'm going to finish up my welcome. I'm going to hand over to Francis, who, while we wait for people to join the call, will tell us a little bit more about Speak Out Revolution. And then at 10 past the hour, we're going to hand over to Rachel Craddock, who's going to run the main event for us. So I'm going to hand over to Francis now. I will continue letting people in, Fran, if I could hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much. So for those who aren't aware, the Speak Out Talks are brought to you by Speak Out Revolution. We're a not-for-profit founded this year during lockdown, and our mission is to cancel the culture of silence on harassment and bullying in the workplace. This came out of a number of people within mine and Marie's network coming to us about experiences they've had in the workplace around harassment and bullying, and that things weren't really being resolved to the standard that we expect from organisations. And we realised that there was a lot of unseen cases of this that are going unreported. We wanted to change that and raise awareness of the issue. So very high level, our vision is to empower everyone to speak out, as we know this is one of the biggest barriers for change to happen in organisations. People don't speak about it. So this is what we're going to be doing via our Speak Out survey. So on our website, you'll be able to find our Speak Out survey. This is an anonymous survey for you to provide your experience of harassment and bullying, to build up our data set to help advocate for organisational change. And we're also going to be presenting this data at a high level on our Speak Out dashboard, so you'll be able to see the extent of this behaviour across different organisations, different industries across the UK, and we are looking to broaden it out internationally over the next year. So as we know, there's many impacted countries around the world for this. Marie, can you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So, as I mentioned, we launched our Speak Out survey and it's live on our website. This was about 3 weeks ago now. And what we're seeing is the most prevalent forms of harassment and bullying are gaslighting, microaggression, and discounting of your work and performance. There's a brief description on the slides for you there. But what should be noted is that these behaviours can be very subtle to you, and you may not be aware of them, that they're happening at the beginning, until you see the impact on yourself, your mental health, your physical health. And that's when it becomes a very big problem and impacts your life. And it's disappointing that we're seeing these behaviours more prevalent, rather than the, I think that's a very negative way to say it, but instead of the more traditional ways of bullying where you expect people yelling at your face and discrediting your work publicly, this is very much a low-level harassment that is impacting people's lives. Marie, will you go into the next slide, please? And the biggest issue is that organisations are only seeing a quarter of the problem. As you'll see from the pie chart, only a quarter of people formally raise that they are being bullied or harassed to their organisation. People informally raise it as well, and 25% do not raise it at all. And what's more shocking is that 95% of people informally raise it before they formally raise it to the employer. Those who don't report it, we've seen from our survey that it's fear of being dismissed as oversensitive. They are worried about harming their career and that nothing will be done. It's impacting their mental health, and they are made to or want to leave their organisation, with actually 60% of people on our survey leaving the company as a direct consequence of these behaviours. So it is a massive impact to organisations, and it's something that we believe needs to change going forward. So thank you very much for that brief overview of the Speak Out Revolution. Thank you for listening to that. I'll hand back over to Marie to umpire the next bit of the session.
Just had to remember to unmute. So thank you so much, Fran, for that overview. As you know, I'm very passionate about the topic, so I very much appreciated that. So we are amazingly on time, which is shocking if you have ever worked with me, because this never happens. Coming up to 10 past 12, I'm going to hand over to Rachel for the main event. So I'd like to say thank you, Rachel Craddock, who's joining us from Thales. We'll be leading the talk on neurodiversity in the workplace. So would you like to start presenting, Rachel? And while you do that, I'll say, I know that people are going to have lots and lots of questions for Rachel. The talk is absolutely fascinating. If I could encourage people to add your questions to the chat, what we'll do is at the end of Rachel's talk, we'll go through the questions and have a dedicated period at the end for Rachel to reflect on people's interests. Thank you. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you. So let me just check. Can everybody hear me? And can you see the slides?
Yes, on both.
Great, thank you. So thank you for inviting me to give this talk. It's a topic that I am very passionate about, and it's quite interesting that the three forms of harassment and bullying that Fran highlighted a couple of slides ago, I have experienced all of them, but until I discovered I was neurodiverse, I didn't know why. So We'll start with an introduction to me, and before anybody asks, that is not my dog. It was just the best photo I have. So I'm a technical consultant specialising in applied artificial intelligence in Thales UK. I'm a fellow of the IET and a chartered engineer. And I've got a PhD, plus other degrees. And I'm the neurodiversity lead for Thales UK. That was a role I took up at the start of 2019. Personal overview, I'm autistic. It's what was known as Asperger's, but the term Asperger's has gone out of fashion now, so I am classed as autistic. I'm potentially attention deficit as well. I'm a survivor of cancer. I have a chronic autoimmune condition. I'm a purple belt in a martial art called Bushido. I've recently passed my violin grade 1, and I have owned a horse for nearly 20 years now, and I ride 3 or 4 times a week. But I'm classed as disabled. Because I had cancer, that means I'm disabled. My chronic autoimmune means I'm disabled. My neurodiversity means I'm disabled. But I've done all this stuff. I've got 3 degrees. I'm married. They let me drive a car. They let me have a job. I don't need a carer, but I'm disabled. And it's this invisible disability, particularly the neurodiversity bit, that causes problems for me, or used to cause problems. And I'll talk more about that as we go along. So first of all, what is neurodiversity? So the quote that I love the best is from Steve Silberman, who wrote a book called Neurotribes. And he said, one way to understand neurodiversity is to remember that just because a PC is not running Windows doesn't mean it's broken. Not all the features of atypical or human operating systems are bugs. One of my colleagues in Thales went extended on this, and he said, we don't even have to be running Windows. Some of us are running Linux, some of us are running Apple Macs. So there are many, many ways that people think, and this is neurodiversity. If we consider it in terms of statistics, neurotypical people are the people in the middle of the bell curve. Neurodivergent people are people out to the edges. It's considered an invisible disability in most people. You will detect it in people who have severe autism, but generally you won't notice. You'll just think the person is slightly strange or has poor behaviour. But it is covered by disability legislation. What are neurodiversity conditions? So we say neurotypical is the people who are within the typical or average range of human neurology. Neurodivergent is the people who are considered atypical in terms of their neurological configuration. There's no standard agreement on what conditions are included. Autism, Asperger's, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, epilepsy, hyperlexia, ADHD, obsessive compulsive, and Tourette's are considered included. There is debate about other conditions such as bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, even left-handedness. What I will say is that it is conditions that are permanent. So if you were suffering from ordinary depression and after a period of time with treatment you stopped suffering from it, that is not considered neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is permanent differences in the brain. The causes are complex and often unknown. Some people believe it's genetic, but there is a lot of research being done trying to work out what causes it. What I can say is it is not due to the MMR vaccine, because I've never had that. Not all neurodiverse conditions are present from birth. Some can appear as the result of a brain injury. For example, a stroke can lead to dyslexia. So within your workplace, you may have people that were neurotypical and then suddenly become neurodiverse. So that is something to be aware of. So statistics for the UK. As of end of June last year, we had just under 67 million people in the country. Approximately 15% are diagnosed neurodiverse. That's across all of the neurodiverse conditions. But that's only the people who are diagnosed. What about those that aren't? And there are a lot of people that aren't diagnosed as children. There's what I call the missing generations, which people like myself, who, when we were children, a lot of these conditions didn't, I won't say didn't exist, they were there, but nobody recognized them. So the potential number of people who are neurodiverse is going to be much higher. And diagnoses in an adult, can take up to 2 years to get. If we break this down into the diagnosed people, dyslexia accounts for about 10%, dyspraxia 5%, ADHD and ADD 4%, autism 2%, and Tourette's syndrome 1%. Now, don't worry if those numbers don't add up to 15%, because people can have multiple conditions. So if I look at the population within Thales, we have approximately 7,000 employees in the UK, which means we have a likelihood of having approximately 1,050 diagnosed neurodivergent employees. That's if we go with the numbers across the UK population. However, engineering does tend to attract people who are neurodivergent. So we probably have more than the 10,050 diagnosed people, but in addition, we've got the undiagnosed employees as well. So a little bit of myth busting now. Let's hit that button a little bit. Right. So neurodiverse conditions, people believe you grow out of it. And I was actually told this by a secondary school teacher. The minute you hit 18, you magically become neurotypical. No. The number of cases are growing. No. The number of diagnoses are growing. The number of cases is as it always has been. It's just people weren't recognised. It can be cured. Oh, that's a very controversial one. And I'll talk more about that later. But no, it can't be cured unless you rewire the brain, in which case you change the person, which doesn't sound good. And there is a thought that neurodiverse people are not intelligent, apart from Asperger's, who are all geniuses. And I have to say that because I know I'm a genius and I have what was known as Asperger's. So autism and Asperger's, the myth is it's limited to males. It isn't. The model used to diagnose and recognize it is based on the male experience. But there are lots of women, lots of females who also have autism. Autistic people do not lack empathy. They actually can have an overwhelming amount of empathy. And they are emotional. They just express their emotions differently to how neurotypical people do. Dyslexia, well, the people can't read properly and spell checkers can fix it all. And they're not intelligent. All of that is wrong. One of the most intelligent colleagues I have is very badly dyslexic. And we had a project manager say spell checkers can fix it. Well, when my colleague is stressed or tired, they don't even notice the little red underlining word, the little red squiggly thing that says there's a spelling mistake. But they're one of the most intelligent people I know. Tourette's, it's not all about swearing and blurting out obscenities. I have a friend who has Tourette's. I've never heard her do either of those. I do sometimes, now I know she has Tourette's, I sometimes spot some of the physical tics, but generally you wouldn't know because she masks it very well. Attention deficit, lazy and cooperative, cannot concentrate, hyperactive all the time. No, they can concentrate extremely well. They may not be able to pick what they concentrate on. It might be like, oh, scribble. 2 hours later, they're the world's expert in squirrels. But if the workplace is set up well for them, they are fantastic workers and offer some wonderful insights into all sorts of things. And dyspraxia, it's not just being clumsy. But what about these people? Steve Jobs, Agatha Christie, Richard Branson, Dan Aykroyd, Steven Spielberg, Daniel Radcliffe, and Michael Phelps. They all have some form of neurodiversity. Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, Steven Spielberg, and Agatha Christie are dyslexic. And we're like, Agatha Christie was dyslexic, but she wrote all those books. Dan Aykroyd, the comedian and star of Ghostbusters, he is autistic and has ADHD. Daniel Radcliffe, you'll recognise him from the Harry Potter films. He is dyspraxic. And Michael Phelps, the champion swimmer, ADHD. But you wouldn't have said any of these guys were disabled or anything like that. So, all neurodivergent conditions have a spectrum. The spectrum is not linear. The spectrum is more like a colour wheel, as I've shown in the slides. It's very complex and multifaceted. Each condition, you will have things that you are extra good at and things that you struggle at. Those effects can vary and change over time or with circumstance. So I know when I am tired or stressed, my autism gets worse. When I have plenty of mental capacity, I can keep my autism under control. What is also interesting is that 17% or more identify with at least 3 conditions. So I know that I have aspects of attention deficit. What else I have, I'm no idea, but it means it's really complex and you can't put people on a straight line spectrum. The other thing I would say is, if somebody tells you they are autistic or neurodiverse, never ever say, oh, don't worry, everyone's on the spectrum, because that can be taken very, very badly. So it's all a matter of degree. How disabled does it make you? Well, that depends very much on the society that you find yourself in. In general, neurodiverse conditions affect people from being in a neurological minority to having a severe disability and needing full-time care. The majority of people don't need full-time care. And if I was to describe the difficulties that, for example, I experience every day, you would turn around and say, but I feel like that too sometimes. But I have it 24/7, 365 days a year. It's forever. It doesn't go away. You know, I can't make it go away. I don't want to make it go away. But sometimes the similarities can help us understand each other. It's the degree to which the difficulties affect you that cause the problems. It's how society treats neurodivergent people. And when the effect of that treatment becomes large, the person becomes disabled. So effectively, we are disabled with respect to the rest of society by being at the edges of the bell curve. Right, wonderful quote. This is from Chris Bonello, who is an autistic advocate. He says, I'm autistic, which means everyone around me has a disorder that makes them say things they don't mean, not care about structure, fail to hyperfocus on singular important topics, have unreliable memories, drop weird hints, and creepily stare into my eyeballs. So why do people say you're the weird one? Because there's more of them than me. That is very true. I'm happy to be the weird one now. You know, I thrive at it. I feel sorry for the people that can't do the things I can do. The other one is, but you don't look different. A lot of forms of neurodiversity can be masked. And masking is where a neurodivergent person looks or behaves completely normal, some of the time or even all of the time. A lot of constant mental effort goes into this. They estimate for autistic people it can be up to 70% of their brain power. If you're employing an autistic person and they're using 70% of their brain power to appear normal, that means you're only getting 30% to do the job you've employed them to do. So if you can find, as employers, you can find ways of allowing these people to not mask or to mask less, they're going to work better for you. So that's a win-win. The big question is, why do people do it? Because it comes at a great mental, emotional, and physical cost. The daughter of one of my friends has just started, well, back in September, started a new class in school. By the end of the first week, having masked all week, she was then physically ill and off school for 2 weeks. The physical cost was huge on her. But we do it to achieve social acceptance and survival. Studies have shown that children as young as 18 months who are neurodiverse realize that they have to behave in a certain way for acceptability. And it is easier to put the effort in than to feel different. Because if you're different, we know what people are like, especially in schools. Children naturally pick on people who are different. Adults should know better, and most of the time do know better, but still don't make life easy. So my neurodiversity experience, I didn't fit in any of my education until I got to do my master's degree. I was bullied and teased a lot. I used to get stomach pains every morning before going to school because I didn't want to go. You know, I didn't fit in. And it really wasn't pleasant. Then when I became an adult, I had long periods of depression due to trying to pass as neurotypical, and also due to not knowing why the world didn't work. I expect it to behave like this, and it behaves like that. And hang on, this doesn't match my mental model. Start of 2013, I suddenly discovered I'm autistic. The world started to make sense, but I was still struggling. I tried explaining to managers at work that I'm autistic. They didn't get it. So I was still struggling. The number of times at work I would leave every day feeling I want to quit. You know, it would be at least 4 days out of 5. Somehow, I've managed to be in my job for over 20 years now. And I think that is luckily because I have found the right place for me to work. I work in a research and development division of Thales, and it's the right fit for me. Then in 2019, I was asked to be the neurodiversity lead for Thales UK. And this started a huge journey of self-discovery about my own neurodiversity. I spent many months learning about neurodiversity in general, especially the conditions that I don't have. But with the help of one of the directors and one of the leadership coaches within Thales, and a couple of other people outside the company, I've been on this fantastic journey. It wasn't easy. My director said to me several times in 2019, are you sure you want to carry on doing this job, the neurodiversity lead? Because it's not easy. And I'm like, no, I'm doing it. But with this journey, I've become aware of what my neurodiversity is. I now accept it. I'm cool about it. It's not a problem to me anymore. It used to be. I now understand it. I understand the strengths as well as the weaknesses. I've grown into being my neurodivergent self. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm also starting to self-advocate. Hold my hand up and say, help. Hold my hand up and say, I don't like what you're doing. Would you mind, etc. I'm starting to put my own needs first. One of the things with autism is that we can be people pleasers. We want to do a good job, but we will overwork ourselves to do that. And I'm also starting to exploit my neurodiversity by giving talks such as this, and by being the neurodiversity lead and trying to make Thales UK and wider society a better place for people who are neurodivergent. I no longer consider myself disabled by my neurodiversity. I used to be disabled where I work. I'm not now. The work I've done over the last 2 years means people accept me and accommodate me. So I am no longer disabled. I don't mask. I'm able to be true to me. And I advocate for acceptance and accommodation of neurodivergent people. Effects in the workplace and society in general. Autism in particular, only 16% of adults with autism are in full-time employment. Compare that with disabled people in general. 47% of adults are in full-time employment. So there's quite a big gap there, and 80% of non-disabled people are in full-time employment. 77% of employed adults with autism would like to work. So something's not quite right there. We do know that how job adverts are written will put people off, saying must have good communication skills. Yeah, that's not always going to be acceptable to somebody who's autistic. They will read it and they were like, I'm autistic, I can't apply for that. Telephone interviews can be a nightmare. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Awareness in the workplace. Only 10% of HR professionals had considered neurodiversity in how they manage their people. 72% have said neurodiversity is not included at all. Psychometric tests and interviews, they're biased against neurodivergent people. Most performance management schemes are not suitable. My director and I have had several conversations about how we give feedback to people with autism and Asperger's in particular, after I got some feedback and I kicked off badly, even though the feedback was wonderful. So sometimes the performance management schemes have to be tailored to consider neurodivergent people. What's quite scary is 73% of neurodivergent people did not disclose their condition during interview. They were scared that if they did, they wouldn't get the job. And I think that's quite terrible. 43% discouraged to apply due to the application process. Already touched on that. Effects on the individual. Unable to work at their best because they're masking. Unable to work at their best because they are suffering from ill health, emotional, mental, and physical, due to being neurodiverse, due to how everybody else in their workplace treats them. And they may not know that they're neurodiverse. They just know that it's as if they're speaking a different language compared to their managers and co-workers. This will cause conflicts. I believe that the majority of problems in the workplace are not caused by people deliberately bullying or bullying neurodivergent people, but gaslighting and the other 2 points that Fan made at the start. I've experienced all of those, and people talking to me in a way that I feel I'm wrong, even though I know I'm right. And I think this was what led to me most days thinking, I can't do this job, I want to quit, I don't like it here, nobody likes me, I'm rubbish, etc. And neurodivergent people may change jobs regularly. You will, if you read blogs of neurodivergent people on the internet, a lot of them don't hold down a job for very long. They're constantly changing. So what can we do? I know that there is stuff we can all do, because I've made a change to me and I've seen changes being made in my workplace. There is still a lot of work to do, but I am seeing changes starting to happen. The big thing is we have to embrace the differences in how people think and how they process information in their minds. I am a firm believer that inclusion of neurodiversity must include everyone. If we only include the neurodivergent people to the exclusion of neurotypical, we failed, because neurodiversity includes neurotypical people. Inclusion steps in the workplace, education and awareness, training staff in what neurodiversity is and how to support each other. Recruitment, accommodate it through the recruitment process, all the way from that very first advert to starting work, on your first day at work, the induction process, etc. Retention. How can we stop good employees who are neurodivergent leaving the company? We have to look at retention. We have to provide a positive and supportive employee experience for everyone. And acceptance. Everyone is unique. Everyone thinks in a unique way. And long term, move away from the neurodivergent labels. I'm a firm believer that we work with everybody uniquely. Everybody should get the same level of acceptance. The labels just give you a starting point. But actually, if you didn't know I was labelled autistic, does it matter? We should all just be nice to each other anyway and accept each other. When will we know we've got inclusion of neurodiversity? Neurotypicals and neurodivergents treated equally. And when it is treated and accepted on a par with conditions such as short-sightedness or needing to wear a hearing aid. Nobody worries about those. Nobody's jealous of those. And that is one indication that we've got inclusion. We're a long way off it at the moment. The fact I'm giving this talk today means we've got a distance to go. So, the big thing, embrace neurodiverse culture. Neurotypicals, few hints for you. Stop using the D words. Disability, dysfunction, difficulty, disorder. They are negative. They are putting neurodivergent people down. They're putting neurodivergent people into a box saying, you're incapable, stay in that box, it's safe. Well, hang on, sorry, no. I have lots of wonderful positive things I can do. I have lots of skills. So I am not disabled. I am not dysfunctional. I do not have difficulties or disorders. I'm great. I love being autistic. Start understanding and learn about the neurodiverse culture. On the other side, neurodivergent people need to start understanding and learning about the neurotypical culture. It's a two-way street. We have to accept and accommodate each other, and we have to meet in the middle. At the moment, it feels that if we've got neurotypicals on one side, neurodivergent on the other, the neurodivergent people are making all the effort to meet the neurotypicals. If we have it that the neurotypical people make all the effort, that's not right either. We need both sides to meet in the middle. Be respectful. Don't be afraid to fail. I often get asked, what if me as a neurotypical person, what if I say something to a neurodivergent person and it upsets them and I didn't mean to? Well, think of it this way. If you went to a foreign country on holiday and you didn't speak the language, you'd learn about the culture, you'd learn to speak the language. And it wouldn't be a problem if you accidentally ordered a plate of snails instead of a beef burger. The failure would be funny. Nobody would be offended. So don't be afraid to fail. It is better to have a go. Whilst everybody's being compassionate and recognizing that there's many opportunities for misunderstanding and offense, but actually making allowances while we all grow and learn together. And 3 things to think about when trying to understand anybody. How do they observe the world? How do they think about things? And how do they express themselves? Because those 3 things, to me, capture neurodiversity very nicely in a nutshell. Right. Any questions?
Amazing. Amazing talk. There's been lots of discussion and various questions that have come up in the slides, Rachel. I wonder if you could just move to the next slide, because I know that some people might have to drop off. So I just wanted to...
There we go.
Fantastic. So just before we move into the Q&A, just wanted to quickly run through, for those of you who will have to drop off to pick up your mince pies and Christmas treats, thank you so much for joining us for the talk. Fantastic talk, Rachel. Lots of questions that we'll pick up on in a second.
Thank you.
So for those that haven't heard about Speak Out Revolution, just a few things to ask, some favours. If you've enjoyed this talk, please engage with us with Speak Out Revolution on social media. We are planning to run 1 talk a month around the wider topics of inclusion in the workplace. We'd love for you to join us. Our next talk will be with Rajendra Pryor from Network Rail, who will be talking about domestic violence in the workplace, making a stand. So we would love for you to join us if you are interested. If you'd like to collaborate with Speak Out Revolution, please reach out to Andreas. His email is there. As Fran mentioned, we are running the Speak Out survey to capture people's lived experiences, which, Rachel, I would love a submission from yourself as someone who can tie your experiences to neurodiversity. We want to understand what people's lived experiences are so we can look at trends across sectors and then start to optimally target our strategic approach so that we can drive change in this space. So for those of you who are passionate about inclusive workplaces, please do share the survey with people in your networks that you know have had challenges through unfair treatment in the workplace. That would be fantastic. And then just to say, if you want to get more involved in the Speak Out talks, we are always looking for people that are interested in talking on topics that deserve attention. Please reach out to Wami. Her email is there. And we're delighted to say that we will be looking for sponsorship for from January 2021 onwards. We've got some amazing talks lined up. If you're interested in sponsoring us, please drop me a note at maria@speakoutrevolution.co.uk. Thanks so much, everyone. So what I'll do is I will move into the questions and the conversation that we have in the chat for the next 15 minutes. So the first question that we had up, Rachel, was from Vanitha, if I've pronounced that correctly. How do we self-recognize if parents and educators are unable to understand?
So I'm trying to unmute. Right, I have unmuted myself. That is a fantastic question. Both my parents were teachers, and they didn't recognise it. But then Asperger's wasn't formally diagnosed in most people until the early 1990s, by which point I was at university. I am seeing a lot in schools, both secondary and primary schools. They are saying that the teachers aren't fully educated in it. The teachers don't have time, even if they do recognise it. The schools don't have a lot of money. And I think that I am seeing friends of mine who are parents of neurodiverse children are having to do a lot of advocacy for their kids. So I think we need a lot more education in general. This needs to get out into society of what neurodiversity is. It's like, if I'm old enough to remember the first gay kiss on British TV back in the 80s, and everybody was like, oh my God. Now look at how LGBT plus is considered. It's a lot more accepted. Everybody's a lot more aware of what it means. And sort of, I'm looking at the young people that I work with, the people in their 20s, and they're cool with it. Neurodiversity, if we start educating, if we make a noise, the same will happen, but it will take a while. So hopefully that addresses some of the question, but that question is a big one.
Thank you, Rachel. So we've got another question from Sean. If we got up to 50% neurodiverse, does that mean there is no neurotypical, i.e., if we included undiagnosed and that was the case?
Potentially yes. I think we're all neurodiverse because neurotypical is part of neurodiverse, and it's a better label for me to give to the people who don't have a diagnosis or don't identify with one of the neurodivergent conditions. It's a better label than me calling them lesser mortals. I'm sorry, they've been bullying and teasing me for my entire life, so every so often I have to get a dig in. But yes, if that bell curve would smooth, the peak would drop, and yeah, we would end up with a more equal proportions across the different conditions.
Fantastic. So there's a comment here from Mark Horton that'd be interesting to get your view on. So he says, in regards to myths and beliefs, we shouldn't use neurodiversity as an excuse as celeb A, B, or C managed to get along in life with their condition. And I think he anticipated your slide and said the classic example being Richard Branson. Just be interested in your thoughts on that, Rachel.
Yes, I used those people in that slide to not say these people managed to get to where they've got to despite their condition. They actually probably got to where they were because of their condition. It gave them unique ways of thinking that allowed them to be good at it. I used those names to say to people, it's okay. And look, these people are thriving. I remember last year I had lunch. It was a family lunch, and my parents had never discussed openly my neurodiversity, even though they'd been told in 2013 by me. They'd never personally discussed it. And over lunch, my uncle said that his son was having an awful time at the moment because my uncle's grandson had been diagnosed as being autistic and that he had Asperger's. And I suddenly said, I've got that. And everybody on the table, they looked at me and they were like, hang on, but you've got a job, you've been married over 25 years, you drive a car, blah, 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 blah. You look normal. Okay, you're a bit weird, but you look normal. How come you've got Asperger's? So I'm trying to say to people, it's not a showstopper. And actually, it enables us to be, it gives us the wonderfulness that we would miss if we were neurotypical.
I agree, Rachel. I'm quite boring. So I'll move on to Mansoor's question. So he asks, is part of the problem with diagnosis in adulthood that the standard assessments run by the NHS are often geared towards children? And in addition to that, do you also think that because adults have spent decades developing their masking strategies to pass as neurotypical, that often drives that or compounds that issue?
The big reason why it takes adults so long to get a diagnosis, unless they go private, is purely money. The NHS doesn't have the resources to provide the amount of diagnostic services that are needed. Even in children, it takes a long time. I don't know the figures for children, but it takes a long time for them to get a diagnosis. What was the second part, sorry?
Unmute. So the second part was, do we think that issue is also compounded by the fact that adults have been masking for so many years?
Thank you. The masking doesn't help. One of the big things with conditions like autism is it's the male model. Women are naturally more sociable. Women will cover it up more easily. But yeah, the masking doesn't help. I think when somebody goes for a neurodivergent assessment, diagnosis, they have to be brutally truthful and honest. I've done various neurodiversity screening tests online. And I'm clever enough. I can spin the results any way I want. I can see through the questions and say, right, if I want to be neurotypical, I have to answer like this. If I want to be neurodivergent, I'd answer like that. So you have to be brutally honest when answering the questions. The other thing I will say on this is that a lot of people in their 40s, 50s and older who missed out on a diagnosis when they were children, they suddenly get an awareness when their children are diagnosed with a neurodivergent condition. They suddenly go, hang on, I do that too. And that's the light bulb for them. And this is where in the workplace, you may find that somebody you thought was neurotypical suddenly turns around and says, oh, I've got a diagnosis. I'm not neurotypical, I'm neurodivergent. Right, sorry to interrupt, Marie, but I've just seen two great comments. One was how to cure. I don't want a cure, because if you were to cure me, how do you remove just the bad bits? How do you keep the good bits? And how do you cure it without changing me? And actually, curing me means that you don't accept neurodiversity. You don't accept me for who I am. So I'm sorry, that's going back to Nazi Germany in my view. And yes, it would completely take away the essence of the person. It is more important that we raise awareness and we start accepting it. There is this big thing in the Western world that if something is different, it must be wrong, and therefore it must be cured. We can't cure it. We shouldn't be curing differences. We should be accepting them and accommodating them, because they bring fantastic insights and thinking into society in general. The other comment, I'm just checking, it was a really good one. I can't see the chat. Right, 2 seconds, bear with me.
Sure, I can look. So we had someone.
Got it. Sorry. It was, what was your light bulb moment? So at the start of 2013, my friend from Ireland sent me a newspaper report. It was from one of the Irish Sunday newspapers. Her husband, who is autistic like myself, he'd been interviewed by this Sunday newspaper, and it was all talking about his experiences throughout life. He'd had a lot of depression, and then he was diagnosed as autistic, and all of a sudden, light bulb moment. And then I read this article, and I read through his experiences, and I thought, hang on, too many of these experiences meet my experiences, not only as an adult, but as a child as well. So I then went online and I did a couple of the screening tests that are online. They don't give you a diagnosis. The screening tests give you you probably are, but you still need a proper diagnosis if you want one. And when my husband was out at the time, and when he came home, I said, here, just do these screening tests. And he did them, and he came out slap bang in the middle of neurotypical. And I came out slap bang in the middle of not neurotypical. And we then both read up about Asperger's and autism, and we both suddenly said, that explains everything. It explains my entire life experience. So that was my light bulb moment. And then, yeah, I told my parents and they were like, it's okay. We won't tell anybody. I'm like, okay, I don't have a problem with you telling people. No, it's okay. We won't tell anybody. So there is still a stigma.
And so that's really great, Rachel. I see that I think Lawrence also kind of reflects what you've said around the diagnosis is so important, as well as the journey of acceptance. So I think for people who have or who are neurodivergent, that next step of recognizing and diagnosing is potentially really helpful for them. I wanted to jump to a question from James Butcher next, in terms of like tangible takeaways, actionable things that people can look at for recruitment. So his comment is, as an employer, I thought the observations about inadvertent exclusion, e.g. must be a good communicator, for example, and testing, but given to ask the question could be construed as discrimination, what practical tips do you have to be more inclusive in recruitment?
Right, I fully appreciate that we can't ask. It's like at where I work, we can't send out a questionnaire saying, are you neurodivergent? We need to know for our statistics. It's up to the individual to self-disclose if they want to. But things you can do to make life easier is, for example, if you are using printed material, don't print it on white paper using black ink, because that high level of contrast makes it more difficult for people with dyslexia. If you print it using a tone of grey on coloured paper, it makes it easier for them. But what you don't do then is you don't just give the dyslexic person who's self-declared, you don't just give them the coloured paper, everybody gets the same, because then you are not highlighting the neurodivergent person in the room. The other thing is there are a lot of organisations who can help. One that springs to mind that I know I've spoken with is a company called Genius Within, and they are very much working to raise awareness in the workplace, help neurodivergent people get and succeed in employment. The other one, ACAS online have a wonderful guide on how to manage neurodivergent people in the workplace, and it possibly includes some stuff about recruitment. And the actual, I'll call them the charities and the support organisations for the different conditions, each of them will be able to, either on their website or if you ring and talk to them, will be able to give you some help and advice.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. So I think that will need to be our last question. So we do have some really interesting questions still unanswered. So we'll work with Rachel to capture some responses and perhaps throw them out on our social media. So I just want to say, I'll wrap up the talk as we're at one. A massive thank you, Rachel, for delivering this talk. Really appreciate it. And thank you for Thales for releasing you for an hour to support the work that we're doing here. I know that, thank you so much. I wanted to say, I know that Wami, who is our program lead for the Speak Out Talks, who was unable to join us today because of childcare challenges, would want me to say thank you, Wami, for all of the work that you have done to make sure we could bring this talk to fruition. So thank you very much. We couldn't put these events on without support from our volunteers, so really appreciate that. And then lastly, I hope that everyone has enjoyed this talk. Thank you for supporting us at Speak Out Revolution. We hope to see you at a future talk, and please do check us out on social media if you're interested in the work that we're doing. So I'm delighted. This is the first time I get to say Merry Christmas, everyone, and have a fantastic new year. We hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.